As stated by Williams and co-authors, graduated driver licensing, referred to herein as GDL, is a risk management system designed to provide novice drivers necessary driving experiences using a stepwise system of increasing situation risk and complexity prior to full driving privileges. The primary goal of GDL laws is to protect novice drivers and those they may encounter on the road by combating driving illiteracy and reducing risky driving behaviors, subsequently reducing the risk of motor vehicle crashes. Currently, in the United States, GDL programs apply to all novice teen drivers up to 18 years of age. However, the specifications for each program vary between states. GDL programs are divided into three general stages. After demonstrating physical competency and basic road law knowledge, prospective drivers enter the first stage, the learner period. Learners' permits have the most restrictions, with the core limitation being that these drivers are required to be accompanied by a licensed adult while driving. The next stage is the intermediate period, where drivers do not need supervision while driving, but have other restrictions. Full licenses do not have any restrictions besides a blood alcohol concentration limit. Numerous determinants of health are involved in the development and success of GDL programs. Under policymaking, two determinants include disparities between the consistency and strength of GDL laws across jurisdictions, as well as the questionable reliability and comprehensiveness of available data analyzing the success of GDL programs. Throughout the United States, GDL criteria differ for supervised driving hours, nighttime restrictions, and passenger restrictions. In addition, some jurisdictions also restrict cell phone usage, maximum speed, allowable traffic violations, and driving location, for example, highways. Social factors comprise the largest group of health determinants for GDL programs in motor vehicle safety and youth drivers. Across the United States, the availability of driver education courses, car ownership, and vehicle safety features are largely influenced by socio-demographic and socio-economic disparities. In addition, the success of supervised driving is associated with the quality of the instruction, as well as behaviors that the supervisors have demonstrated. If the supervisor displays risky driving behaviors before, during, and even after the process of a teen obtaining a full license, then the teen may replicate these actions, assuming that the behaviors must not be that risky if their supervisor has been successful. When teen drivers have peers as passengers, there's an elevated chance that the driver will engage in risky driving behaviors, as peers can encourage risky behaviors, can feel pressured not to call out behaviors that bother them, and can be a huge distraction to the driver. The media has not been too helpful in shaping the perception of risk-taking during driving, including drunk driving, speeding, and drifting. While the media has been mostly successful in campaigning against drunk driving, there are still leaps to be made in regard to other risky behaviors. Individual health behaviors also have a huge impact on GDL programs. Underage drivers, although in smaller numbers, still continue to take the risk of driving while under the influence of alcohol, marijuana, and other illicit substances. Speeding and drifting are two behaviors that teen drivers may engage in just for the risks for the adrenaline rush. Other individual behaviors that influence GDL success are seatbelt use and multitasking while driving. It is well established that texting and driving is a major contributor to motor vehicle accidents. However, few states specify that this is a prohibited practice. The last category for determinants of health is biology and genetics. Several studies have shown mixed results of the effects of mental health status on the rates of motor vehicle crashes in teen drivers. These studies are somewhat poor in evaluative quality, as many focus on endpoints based on driver self-report rather than objective measures of accident risk. Key players for GDL programs include researchers, the public, citizen action groups, state governments and officials, national level non-governmental advocacy and policy organizations, and the federal government. Dr. Patricia Waller of the United States is credited with pioneering and advocating for GDL programs based on age and experience. Researchers such as Dr. Waller are invaluable to GDL as they use existing data to determine the scope of the problem, to elucidate what variables impact that problem, to assess the success of implemented programs, and to evaluate what aspects of the implemented programs are effective, unnecessary, and/or could be improved upon. For the first 2 decades after GDL was proposed in the 1970s, some key players were resistant to the change, though the majority of researchers largely supported the concept. In the mid-90s, the attitude of the public and state governments swiftly changed from resistant to supportive, prompting the implementation of GDL programs in several states. The reason for this sudden change of perception still remains a mystery. However, it has been proposed that changes in social climate and public attention, as well as increases in research and advocacy, were the main catalysts. Citizen action groups such as Remove Intoxicated Drivers and Mothers Against Drunk Driving are also key players. These groups were highly successful in advocating for and influencing changes in state and federal law regarding drinking and driving. Citizen action groups focus on other aspects of novice youth driving may have a similar impact on improving existing GDL laws. The Department of Transportation of each state government has the authority over their respective driving laws, and since 1996, all states have enacted some form of GDL. State government decisions are influenced by a number of other key players, such as public opinion and support, empirical evidence from researchers, federal government mandates, and external stakeholder opinions, and are influenced by risk-benefit considerations, including cost, ideology, and electoral support. Though the federal government passed the National Highway Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act and the Highway Safety Act in 1966, which grants it the power to assess and establish safety standards for motor vehicles and highways, there is sparse federal legislation impacting youth and novice drivers that states are expected to enforce. Currently, federal law impacting motor vehicle and driving safety is focused on drinking and driving. It has been demonstrated that federal mandates are extremely effective in reducing motor vehicle injuries and fatalities, and that fluctuations in federal mandates influence state law to the point where states will not enforce public motor safety unless otherwise monetarily incentivized or penalized. Other than developing safety standards, the federal government has developed national campaigns to inform the public about risky driving behaviors, including television commercials focused on underage drinking and driving, texting while driving, and seatbelt use. External stakeholders of GDL laws include driver education and motor vehicle agencies, high schools, the media, insurance companies, and medical associations. Driver education and motor vehicle agencies comprise the overall process of receiving a license. High schools may or may not offer a driver education program. The media is a forum for national safety campaigns in general, including in relation to GDL components. Insurance companies are involved by their nature of addressing motor vehicle accidents. Medical associations not only take care of injured drivers, but they also inform on biological and psychological factors that may influence a person's quality of driving. Community resources used to implement GDL programs include law enforcement, which makes sure novice youth drivers are complying with their license stage, insurance companies, which can provide incentives for better driving habits, and state departments of motor vehicles, which manage the driver licensing process. The government, at both the state and federal levels, primarily funds GDL programs. The federal government provides incentive grant programs, which are generally leveraged to enact and improve state GDL programs. GDL research is primarily funded by federal agencies, but published studies have also been funded by non-governmental organizations, state agencies, universities, and even insurance and car companies. Lobbying for financial support for a new GDL intervention is primarily dependent on the scope of the project and the potential financer's interest and commitment. For a nationwide intervention, the initial approach would be to lobby the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. If there's no interest or support at the federal level, approaching one of the 51 state departments of transportation is a next logical step. Identifying the specific Department of Transportation to approach requires research of the programs it has funded or is funding in order to assess potential interest and whether the intervention is duplicative of an effort in progress. Sustaining funding depends on the success of the intervention and decreases in societal costs related to motor vehicle crashes. Developing an intervention that builds on the existing GDL framework, such as standardizing the minimum restrictions during the different licensing stages, would help to reduce the initial cost of implementations as well as the long-term costs of maintenance. As motor vehicle crashes become less frequent or even less expensive, more funds can be diverted into maintaining or developing interventions. In 1993, drivers aged 15 to 20 years accounted for approximately 14% of drivers involved in fatal motor vehicle crashes and 14% of traffic fatalities. The estimated cost for a fatal motor vehicle accident was $702,000 in 1993. These statistics, along with numerous other analyses and public demand from citizen action groups, prompted policymakers to implement GDL programs. Motor vehicle accidents were and still are the leading cause of death in adolescents and young adults. Teen drivers are 3 times more likely to be involved in a motor vehicle accident per mile driven than drivers aged 20 years and older. In 2015, it was estimated that over 223,000 non-fatal motor vehicle accidents occurred in teens, and almost 3,600 teens died due to motor vehicle crashes. Ethical concerns regarding GDL are centered on fairness, parental factors, current research, and policy consistency. When GDL was introduced, many believed that the policy was unfair in that it specifically targeted novice drivers under 18 years old, and it quote-unquote punished new drivers who would not get into car accidents by making it more difficult for them to attain a license. Ethical concerns regarding parental factors include the potential for parents to lie or overestimate the amount of supervised driving time they and their child completed, the potential for a novice teen driver to not have parents who can supervise them during the learner phase, and the potential that parents are not sufficient enough to be educating their child in correct and safe driving techniques. The flaws and limitations of existing studies, lack of understanding of specific GDL components, and state-level authority over driving laws has resulted in each state implementing a different set of criteria for their GDL program. The variety in programs makes comprehensive studies of GDL effectiveness difficult, as it is not truly known if results from one jurisdiction will translate equally to another jurisdiction. Opponents to GDL can include the public, primarily parents and affected teenagers, policymakers, and specific industries. Parental support may be hindered by the personal burden GDL can impose on them, such as needing their newly driving children to run errands and needing the supervised driving time for other activities, among other personal reasons. Support from affected teenagers is impacted by their perspective of the burden of GDL on their social lives and on their autonomy as an up-and-coming adult. Policymakers at all levels of government are influenced in their support of proposed public health reforms by many factors, including the cost of the intervention and whether the intervention is in the favor of the public opinion. Industries that may oppose GDL include law enforcement, who would have additional duties for enforcement of GDL laws, and driver education agencies, who would lose a massive amount of profit since research has demonstrated that driver education alone is not sufficient, nor is it a reliable substitute for supervised driving. Improving the GDL programs is dependent on convincing state governments on how to improve and expand their existing programs. This would take a collaborative effort from many organizations, including the federal government, citizen action groups, public, researchers, and NGOs. Key results of the scientific studies evaluating GDL programs, including improvements in fatal and non-fatal crash rates, should be the main focus of marketing to the non-public entities, as pushing for the most comprehensive and effective program to be implemented across states is an ultimate goal. Policymakers should also become aware of parents' and teenagers' acceptance of specific GDL programs to make them understand areas of little versus significant public opposition. In order to convince the public to adopt more comprehensive GDL programs, one significant partnership to develop would be between the federal government and state and local level NGOs and citizen action groups. The federal government could provide funding, and the NGOs and action groups would provide the effort. NGOs would engage in studies and marketing, such as commercials, online ads, and print ads, whereas citizen action groups would conduct public outreach events educating the community. For example, using governmental funds and the media, the citizen action group Mothers Against Drunk Driving was integrated into the discussion of drunk driving and established a face behind the motor vehicle injuries, which influences policy and the public. In addition, current state government commercials against drunk driving and against texting while driving could be supplemented to include crash statistics related to teenagers driving at night and to the effects of passengers being in the car, common components of GDL programs. Public understanding of why certain components are included in GDL programs may help to garner the support needed to convince legislators to be more aggressive. GDL was successful due to a shift in public attitude combined with years of studies demonstrating that youth novice drivers were overrepresented in fatal and non-fatal crash rates and remained successful due to improvements in enforcement. Enacting a stepwise program in which prospective drivers must practice driving in certain situations is a logical and justified response to the increased risk that young drivers pose to road safety. In the short term and long term, GDL programs have generally resulted in a consistent decrease in non-fatal and fatal motor vehicle crashes. Sustainability and applicability of this program are dependent on continued research, as more information is needed to elucidate which components of established programs are most effective and what new components could be included. Public attention to the issue is crucial to maintain, as governments could divert funding from their GDL programs without public opinion. In the long term, however, technological advances in motor vehicles, communication devices, and other causes of distracted driving may undermine the effects of GDL. As GDL programs are adjusted, it is scientifically necessary and expected that those in the public health sector would reevaluate trends in motor vehicle safety in order to determine if the GDL changes were effective and if technological advances hinder success. With the right support, GDL programs can be easily integrated into any community with several steps: assessing the problem or risk for the community, assessing the attitudes and opinions of affected persons, devising and implementing a program based on studies of programs in similar communities, and enforcing the program through mutually beneficial partnerships between key payers and stakeholders. Thank you.